It's often said that your thyroid is like the thermostat for the body,
Right.
right? And I couldn't actually say that's more true.
Welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have a very special guest in store for you, Ryan Monahan. He is beloved in the functional medicine space. He's an FDN practitioner, thyroid expert, mold expert, and everyone who I've met in the FDN community reveres Ryan and his knowledge base. So, welcome to the podcast, Ryan. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited about this.
For sure. So we already had a whole conversation on mold. If you
Mhm.
are curious about mold, go back to that episode. It's just a couple episodes behind this one. And today we're going to deep dive into thyroid health because thyroid is one of those topics where I feel like people don't get it. They
Mhm.
are being told that they're just fine, and fine in the current climate of what's fine is absolute BS in my opinion. And so I'm excited to kind of deep dive into this topic. So, will you kick us off today with what led you to becoming a thyroid expert in the first place?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I had never had plans on mastering the thyroid or getting into the line of, functional medicine or anything like that. It was really through my own personal health journey where at the age of 28 years old, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And prior to that, I had been on a journey of about 10 years going from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist. I had actually visited over 40 doctors in total, if you can even
Wow.
believe that,
Wow.
before I had even had a doctor that ran a thyroid panel on me. So it wasn't until I visited this TCM, traditional Chinese medicine doctor. He was the first one that had run a thyroid panel or even considered running a thyroid panel on me. And prior to that journey, if I can kind of share a bit about what I was going through up until that
Yeah.
point in time, it really started when I was a teenager, but started to rapidly decline in like my college years. I was dealing with pretty debilitating fatigue, brain fog, depression, constipation, a lot of allergies and ear, nose, and throat issues like chronic allergies, postnasal drip, asthma, right? There wasn't really a day that went by where I didn't, could go without using an inhaler. So I had all these kind of mystery symptoms. They all seemed kind of separate in my mind. Like they're all in these different boxes or silos.
Yeah.
And traditionally, when you're using the Western medical model as your primary tool, like that's how they're looking at it too, right? They're trying to treat the different symptoms. There wasn't really much of a discussion about how all of these things might be interconnected or interrelated.
True.
So it took me a long time to find answers, like a very, very long time. And meanwhile, I mean, there were periods of times where I was barely able to get out of bed with how severe the chronic fatigue was. I would sleep for 12, 14 hours a day, still feel completely exhausted, just kind of staring at the ceiling, like immobile. And there were actually points and times where I felt borderline suicidal because I was so sick. I felt like I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it, that it was so much of this was experienced internally, although
Right.
I did have some like inflammation on my face, right? These sort of things, but it was not obvious to other people around me, but I could feel it deeply internally. So,
Right.
other people, they look at you and go, you look fine. What are you talking about?
Right.
I didn't know what was going on. I thought at one point maybe I had cancer or something. I know that sounds dramatic, but I just had no idea really what was going on with my health. But I did know intuitively that something was off.
Sure.
And with the very little energy that I did have, I was determined to find answers and eventually did find out that I had this thyroid diagnosis from this TCM doctor, and it changed everything for me. I mean, when I say changed everything, I often say that there are two chapters in my life, like everything before the
Yeah.
thyroid diagnosis and everything after, because that's what led me to doing this line of work, which I'm still, 10 years later, still at it and helping people with all the knowledge I can to be able to move their health in the right direction.
Absolutely. So do you think that the reason you weren't tested is because you're a man? Like, do you think it's that
Yeah,
we always think of thyroid conditions for women and there's just lack of awareness that we should also be testing men?
I do think that's part of it. I think men do tend to get overlooked. Like I had mentioned, I had gone over 10 years with these red flags for thyroid issues, brain fog, fatigue, depression, constipation. Like that's like textbook
Mhm.
hypothyroidism, right?
Yeah.
And it took me till doctor number 40, 41
Wow.
to even run a basic thyroid panel. I'd never had that done before. So, yes, it's true. The ratio of women to men diagnosed with thyroid issues is about 7 to 1,
Okay.
right? So it is kind of commonly conceived or observed as being like a women's disease, but that's not entirely true.
Sure.
And so you have to wonder how many men are going under the radar because either it's thought of as a women's disease or maybe because men are less likely to seek that kind of help, right?
Sure.
So that could factor into it. So also maybe because I wasn't dealing with the weight gain
Right.
component, which is really common with hypothyroidism,
Right.
I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't have that issue.
Okay.
I had all the other signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism, but I wasn't overweight. I was still pretty slim. So
Mm.
maybe just because, yeah, the physical appearance, it was overlooked that it could be a thyroid issue. So it's hard to say, but
Yeah.
those could factor into it.
So interesting. So mothers, wives, people who are listening, if you're related to a man who's defining the same symptoms that we would define for thyroid issues for women,
Hmm,
encourage them to go get that thyroid panel because it's just not as commonly done. And that's
that's right.
something good to know because recently I did a whole bunch of testing on my kids and I was like, whoa. So now I've been telling all my friends, just so you know, you can ask your pediatrician to test your kid for A, B, C, and D. We should get their vitamin D levels. We should know how they're doing. We should know their cholesterol levels. We're assuming that we shouldn't be checking the kids because they're kids, but kids are having all the same problems we are. Whatever template you are in your household with your genetics,
Hmm,
it could be happening in your kid and you could catch things way earlier and deal with
sure.
the thyroid panel as well, right? With the explosion of autoimmunity, we are starting to test thyroid more, but we should do so in the boys as well.
And we should be doing it earlier,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And essentially, everyone that comes through my door,
Yeah.
even virtually speaking, right? Every client that I work with, I run a full thyroid panel.
Okay.
And if nothing comes up, great.
Yeah.
It's a relatively inexpensive test, and at least we can rule that out as being a possibility and move on to other things. But there's no harm in my opinion, gathering maybe what would be perceived as more information than you would need. I mean, my approach is always when working with anyone, let's leave no stone unturned,
Yeah.
gather as much information as possible. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years that have been doing this for the past 10 years, where they come to me, saying, my doctor won't run a thyroid panel. They say you don't need it.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we know? It's a total black box. You're just guessing that you don't need it,
Right.
right? Like why wouldn't we just run it just to as a precaution, right? So
Yeah.
famous study that was done in the New England Journal of Medicine I believe it was 2003. This is really fascinating. They looked at the blood that had been stored from veterans that had been in active service for many years. So they actually had their blood in storage, like frozen in a facility where
Okay.
they had run their blood every year, dating back to 1978.
Wow.
This is really fascinating.
That's
And
cool.
so they looked at this population of veterans diagnosed with lupus, and they wanted to see, was there a possibility they could have had these antibodies months or even years before the lupus diagnosis? So lupus is an autoimmune condition, right?
Right.
They found that on average, for the average veteran that was diagnosed with lupus, looking at this data bank of blood chemistry, they had the signs or the antibodies for lupus going back 5 years before the lupus diagnosis.
Wow.
So it's really interesting because they were sort of able to go back in time.
Yeah.
They had all this blood chemistry stored. So that really ought to inform our strategies for prevention
Yeah.
and earlier detection. Where in my case, Shivani, like I'm convinced I had that Hashimoto's condition for maybe 10 to 15 years before I finally found out I had the diagnosis. I could have
Wow.
saved myself a decade worth of pain and heartache and needless suffering had I been able to figure that out earlier. By the time I was actually diagnosed, my thyroglobulin antibodies, which are one of the two main antibody markers to detect Hashimoto's, this
Hmm.
autoimmune component to hypothyroidism, the antibody levels I had, I think, were somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500
Wow.
units, which is pretty darn high. Which so what does that tell you? I mean, it tells you that it was pretty far progressed
Yeah.
by the time it had actually been detected.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
so interesting. You highlighted a few things there. One that's very interesting is you lost a decade to 15 years of your childhood,
Yeah, 100%.
your 20s, like your
Right.
teens. That's the last thing I would ever dream happening to someone. Those were the fun years. And you were sitting there bedridden and sick and not understanding what was wrong with you. And I
Right.
think a lot of times when these things happen to us in that age, like the teens to 20s age, it's so formative because for me at least, I was in college and I was looking around. Everyone was partying, having fun. I was chronically sick and I couldn't
Yeah.
understand. I was like, how come I don't have an immune system that works and y'all do? Like, how did God make you different? And got the weak link body here. I got the
Mm,
lemon and I want to fix this vehicle. What do I have to do? And so, yeah, it becomes this like calling of no one else should have that happen to them. I have to change how
yes.
this is done. And the second thing you said that was so interesting was the blood bank idea. I was like, dang, I would like to freeze all my blood year after year so I could go back 20 years from now and we could have a whole level of analysis because we keep understanding things better. So
Yes.
it would be interesting to look back and be like, oh, she thought her problem was X at age 45, but her problem was really Y. And had she tested these 5 things that we know now, she would have learned more. And so looking into functional medicine versus traditional medicine right now, functional medicine kind of feels that way in many ways about traditional medicine because when my friends tell me I'm fine and my numbers are fine, look at my report card, and they show
Mm,
me their Quest blood results, I'm like, we're going to have to agree to disagree because until you go to a functional medicine doc who sits there and says, no, 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 Shivani, I don't care that your vitamin D is 35, 45, 55, or 65. Here's your range. I need you 75 to 85. You're on the F chart of my grades until you can get yourself there. And
yes.
here's your homework to get there. So I love that in functional we are talking about health optimization and reaching true levels of wellness that we deserve to have, which is us feeling like our most vibrant self from our 20s or 30s, wherever that is for you. I think a lot of us are trying to reverse back into the 20s level of energy. But how does someone talk to their doctor and say, look, what I usually say is, look, I will pay for it. I know insurance will only cover up to a certain point. I still
Hmm.
want the test done. Yeah, I might have to pay $30 for the vitamin D, but I need to know the benchmark of where I am. If I'm making the time to go do the blood work, I need the data. I find sometimes people don't order it because they're not going to treat for it. So they're like,
Mm,
well, why should I
that's right.
test you?
Yeah.
So will you explain what are those thyroid tests people need to run and not just thyroid, but the important building blocks that we need as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to go over the lab tests that should be included in a full thyroid panel.
Yeah.
But to just kind of pedal back for a second, if you have a doctor that's unwilling to run those markers, sometimes you do need to be a little bit more assertive or be an advocate for yourself
Yeah.
to be able to run those markers. Like you said, like, look, I'll pay for it. It's my health. I know you might not be interested in or think that it's important, but I do. Okay. And there have been times in the past where actually the second endocrinologist that I went to, I asked for a full thyroid panel, and word for word, he told me that would be a waste of your money.
Right.
They wouldn't do it. So I never went back to him.
Yeah.
I sort of quietly fired him
Yeah.
and moved on. And sometimes that's what we need to do. We need to find someone that aligns with our values and is going to be open, right? Or they work with someone like me remotely,
Yeah.
where I'm very open to running all of that blood chemistry to be able to see as much as possible, right?
Right.
All right. So that being said, when we're looking at a full thyroid panel, there's 6 markers that are especially important. And in my opinion, all of these are non-negotiable in order to see the whole picture. Otherwise, we just have a very limited view of what's going on.
Sure.
Traditionally, most doctors will only run a marker called TSH. That's thyroid stimulating hormone. Let's kind of stop right there and unpack just that for a second and why that's massively problematic if we only run TSH. First of all, TSH is not even produced by the thyroid gland. So it's not even technically a measurement of thyroid function at all. TSH is produced by the pituitary gland. And it's a signal to stimulate the thyroid into action. If, like, let's say the thyroid's under functioning and it's lazy, right? Then TSH might increase to sort of provoke or initiate that thyroid into action, right? But technically, that hormone is produced by the pituitary. It doesn't say anything about how the thyroid is functioning. We get a better view of how the thyroid is functioning by measuring the actual thyroid hormones, which we'll come back to in a second, right? So that's kind of the main problem with running TSH by itself, is it really gives you a very, very incomplete view of what the thyroid's doing. It's not even technically a thyroid marker at all.
Sure.
Right? So TSH by itself, I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it's so important, is almost useless. It's on its own.
Sure.
In context with the other markers, it can be helpful, but on its own, it's pretty close to useless. Okay. Right? So we want that TSH, but not without the following markers. We want to see free T4 and free T3, right? Not just total T4 and total T3. The free, that word designates the fact that those are the bioavailable portions or fractions of those hormones, what your cells can actually take in and utilize. So we want the free bioavailable portions. We call those T4 and T3. T4 is primarily produced by the thyroid. Then it's converted into T3 in the liver. About 80% of that conversion happens in the liver. And it's the T3 that's really the good stuff. That's the main bioactive thyroid hormone. What does T3 do? Well, it's often said that your thyroid is like the thermostat for the body, right? And I couldn't actually say that's more true, because when I was experiencing that extreme hypothyroidism before I was diagnosed, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, in that area of the South.
Yeah.
Very warm, hot, humid climate, almost year round. And I would be wearing like a sweater in 80, 90 degree weather, like in June or July.
Wow.
And I'd have my friends looking at me like, aren't you like crazy hot in that sweater? And I'd be like, no, I'm like free. I'm like shivering, right? Well, when your thyroid is under functioning, you're not producing enough T4, which then results in also low T3 levels. And it's that T3 that it gets taken in by almost every cell of the body. And it's like the metabolic activator. T3 is it's like the accelerator pedal for the gas pedal on your car. That's how profoundly powerful that hormone is.
Wow.
So low T3 levels, it's like letting off the gas pedal for your whole metabolism. So then what do you get? You get fatigue, brain fog, depression, weight gain, constipation, cold intolerance, hair loss, right? All of these things that are hallmarks of hypo or slow thyroid function.
Got it.
So now this is really important to mention, that your TSH can be normal, but you can have low T4 or low T3. Another reason why running TSH on its own is, like I said, almost useless.
Got it.
So that TSH in many cases can be sort of a lagging indicator. Like the thyroid hormone levels can drop, but it can take a long time for the TSH to respond, to become elevated.
Wow.
Right? So you can totally miss, your TSH can look normal, and you could totally miss the fact that you're actually in reality hypothyroid because the T4 and T3 are low, but the doctor didn't run those levels.
Got it.
Right. Okay. So then marker number 4 out of 6 here is called reverse T3.
Right.
So if T3 is like the gas pedal, the accelerator pedal. Reverse T3 is the brake pedal.
Okay.
We don't want reverse T3 to be elevated, right? Because that means we're putting on the brake too hard. And that reverse T3, what does it do? It actually blocks T3. It's what's called reverse T3.
Right.
So if that's too high, even if your T3 is normal, reverse T3 being too high can prevent your cells from taking in the T3. Interesting little side note here, but it's really pretty fascinating and it may be relevant to the growing popularity of fasting strategies. Sure. Fasting can elevate your reverse T3.
Interesting.
Which slows down your metabolism. I see this all the time on lab work, right?
Really?
Which is totally counter to what you're trying to achieve.
Of course.
Well, why does the body do that? It says, well, geez, I'm in starvation mode right now. I'm not getting any nutrients or calories. So I need to put on the brakes. So I stop the rate at which we're burning through macronutrients or micronutrients. Like we're slowing down the rate of our metabolism. So that's a potential word of caution. I would say anyone with even an inkling of having thyroid issues, I do not recommend any kind of fasting strategies, at least until you get that all sorted out.
Wow.
Right. So then we have lastly the two thyroid antibodies for Hashimoto's, which are TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, TPO, and then the other are thyroglobulin antibodies. So those two markers would tell you if there's an autoimmune process going on, if there's that Hashimoto's component to the thyroid issue. Now, one last layer to this is that the majority of those that I work with slow thyroid function, they don't know that they have Hashimoto's because their doctor has never run the antibodies. Wow. Because in their view, it won't change the approach at all. It won't change the diagnosis. It won't change how they're medicated. So most people don't know that the main primary cause of hypothyroidism in at least 95% of cases of hypothyroidism are caused by the Hashimoto's. So how can we sit there and say that it's not important to test for the antibodies?
Of course.
So what's the relationship there? If your immune system is attacking your thyroid and causing inflammation to the thyroid, that compromises the thyroid gland's ability to make thyroid hormone.
Right.
I make this analogy of like, a factory producing widgets, but the factory is getting bombed every day. Like that's going to slow down production. It's going to slow down output.
Yeah, quite
right. So, all right. Well, what does that tell us? Can we figure out how to slow down the autoimmune attack on the thyroid so that the thyroid could start to regenerate its tissue and start making thyroid hormone more effectively again? Yeah.
So interesting. So one thing you said about fasting was super fascinating to me because there's a whole movement. There's like, when it comes to wellness trends of 2025, two of them, and intermittent fasting is probably before, but 2024 and 2025, I've seen so much about intermittent fasting. Sometimes that comes down to who you're following on social, who produces the highest volume of content. But intermittent fasting has been a big one. In Ayurveda, we always teach, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, my job is to teach the moderate road. I teach not to go into the excesses. I'm not teaching carnivore, and I am not teaching you to eat on a 20 and 4 intermittent fast where you eat in a 4 or 6 minute window or 6 hour window. I'm teaching like a 12-12, a max 14-hour fast, max. And it's interesting because I have an HRT team. I have a team in place right now, and they have managed my hormone health beautifully for the last year. And now all of a sudden I got a whole new battery of information on myself, which is why Ryan and I have become fast friends, because Ryan's incredibly knowledgeable. I was like, wait, mold, please help me. I need help. Mold in my home caused severe leaky gut, which has caused health struggles and issues on the inside. I'm lucky. I know through you, I'm very lucky. I don't have mold illness symptoms severely, but I've definitely got some symptoms. And I'm like, oh, I got to stop and address this, and to not take a moment and really it's going to probably be 6 months to a year, to not take a minute and pause and let functional medicine and I together synergistically put a real beautiful plan in place to heal, means downstream I'm going to have major autoimmune issues or immune system dysfunction. And I know that. So it's time to pause. But it's interesting, the intermittent fasting piece, because I love testing all ideas. So the other day I held a really big fast. I was like, you know what? I don't have time to eat anyway. I'll just not eat till 12:30. And that's a big fast. I hadn't eaten since 6 p.m. the day before. By yesterday in the afternoon, my body had one of those horrible headaches it knows how to generate that I cannot get rid of without Tylenol. And I'm very stubborn. I'm like, I'm not taking medicine. I don't need medicine. I was like, I can just get through it. Hydration, electrolytes. I was doing all my natural minerals. I go down my list and I thought, you weren't meant to hold that fast. You pushed it too far. You're pushing the body too far and you're expecting the body to just always bounce back. Sometimes you have to remember the body needs input. So will you highlight that a little further? Because I think people love the trends. They're like, oh, my friend did carnivore and look at her. She's phenomenal. I'm going to do it. Or my friend can hold an 18-hour fast. I should be able to. But if you think about it, like the analogy you said so beautifully, gas pedal, are you internally putting the brakes on your own metabolism and slamming the brakes while you're thinking that you're doing something good for your metabolism?
So a few years back, I went deep down this rabbit hole of studying fasting and the mechanisms and so on and so forth. And I was listening to this podcast. It was actually an interview between Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Dr. Walter Longo.
Okay.
Dr. Walter Longo is the Prolon guy, the fasting mimicking diet guy, right? Huge funding from the NIH and to study fasting and its mechanisms. So I mentioned this because I had heard him say something that I had never heard before on this podcast, where Dr. Rhonda Patrick said something to the effect of, well, isn't, fasting a major stressor on the body? It's signaling starvation. It's putting your body into a fight or flight mode. It's going to be really tough on the adrenals and so on, right? You can go on and on with that. And he said something kind of provocative or interesting, which is, no, actually, eating is more of a stressor on the body. That if we looked at our kind of hunter-gatherer ancestry, that for most of human history, the default state, the normal state was starvation. Sure. We would go long periods of time without food, right? Sure. And then, occasionally it was feast or famine. And then we would, hunt down a buffalo or something. And then we would feast for, 2 weeks at a time. And then maybe another month without food, something along those lines, right? Sure. So that's really interesting. Is that true? Yeah, like starvation is the default state. And I've tried to think about this more and more over the years. And where I've come to in terms of my own opinion on this is we're not hunter-gatherers anymore.
No.
Okay? So we are under the influence, so to speak, or encounter an exponentially more stressors in the modern lifestyle. So I don't think it's a fair comparison to kind of compare this. Yeah, hunter-gatherers, maybe they work like 15 hours a week of what we would consider work. And this has actually been documented that on average, hunter-gatherers worked about 15 hours a week because they weren't trying to climb the corporate ladder, right? They were just trying to feed their families. And the rest of their time would be spent with family, telling stories around the campfire, playing games, right? There was more what we would call recreational time than there was time working. They're also spending more time outdoors. The air was cleaner. The quality of the food was cleaner. They weren't eating processed foods. They weren't getting exposed to mold toxins in their environment, heavy metals. They had their feet on the ground, so they're grounding, right? Yeah. Like there are so many things that working in their favor, these sort of tailwinds working in their favor to support their health and physiology. Right. Where I just don't think, especially for those that live a very stressful, fast-paced, busy lifestyle, that you add another stressor on top of that, like fasting. I'm not saying I never say anything as a dogmatic rule, like never fast. Okay, that's
Right.
not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, we really need to consider that in the context of the totality of that person's life, in context of their adrenal function, their cortisol levels, their thyroid function, and say, like, is this person metabolically flexible or healthy enough to support something like fasting? And I got to tell you, maybe 90% of my clients, or maybe even more, I would say the answer to that would be no. That
Wow.
they have like no business trying to layer that on top of all the other stressors they're going through. Not to mention all of the what I call hidden stressors in the body,
Right.
these things that I test for, like pathogens and toxic burdens and nutrient deficiencies, hormone imbalances. So, long story short, is it depends. I know
Right.
that was a long-winded answer, um, but I think for a lot of people, it's doing more harm than good. One quick thing I'll add to that too
Yeah.
is I do a lot of food journaling,
Mm.
tracking with clients, and looking at their nutrient intake.
Yeah.
And most people are dealing with at least a few, if not more, nutrient deficiencies. So
Right.
you're cutting your number of calories in half,
Yeah.
right? Just so by default, even if you're eating healthy foods, right now you're adding this additional stressor of not being able to get enough nutrition in the diet. So
Yeah,
there you
no, I'm glad you highlighted that and I appreciate it because it's easy. It's easy to just jump in with the trends and amazing people in our space are talking about how fasting is the best thing. What I appreciate is a lot of them, like even Mindy Pels, is like, hey, but women on your cycle, we have to be a completely different approach. We can't say we're holding the 14, 16, or 18-hour fast every day, 30 days a month. We have to really move with this. We have to be flexible with this.
Yeah, I
And
like
so it's
that.
interesting that you highlighted metabolic resilience and metabolic flexibility. If you are going to the doctor because you're saying, "Hey, I have a concern here. Something is wrong. I feel like I have all the thyroid symptoms here. Can you help me?" And your doctor's like, "Oh, I tested a few numbers. You're fine. You're fine. You're normal. I don't really understand why you're complaining." Like I have a friend recently who went to the doctor and I said, "Listen, everything you're saying is thyroid, you need support, and this is perimenopause symptoms, and you need HRT." Like, and she's like, Shivani, sometimes it's hammer and nail. I know that's all you read about. And I was like, okay, I'm right, but okay. And so she went to the doctor. The doctor goes, maybe you just need to reduce your stress, eat less, and exercise more. And I felt like punching somebody. I was like, are you kidding me right now? And another doctor was like, maybe we should put you on birth control, regulate your hormones. And I thought, really?
Mm,
Doctors in Boca Raton, Florida, these are the answers you're giving to my friends. And you know me, I'm
mm.
out here saying this is not the approach any of us need to take. I feel like emailing every doctor like scientific studies on a weekly basis and saying,
Right.
hey, can you please catch up here? Can I please take you to some of these functional medicine conferences? Um, but when patients come to you and you're saying a very powerful statement, which is, I'm not seeing the metabolic flexibility and resilience in place, and you highlighted micronutrients.
Mm,
My understanding, because I'm in a whole functional medicine course right now around metabolomics and these topics, they said
yeah.
almost all of us, you could say 95% plus, because I'm sure there's some 2 to 5% on this planet who can be great at this somewhere, maybe in Sardinia. Um, what are those micronutrients and will you name them for us? Because I believe they start with vitamin D, magnesium. Like there's a handful of important micronutrients and we're underestimating their importance. And will you highlight which ones are related to thyroid health since that's our topic today?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of different directions we can go with that,
Yeah.
right? So distinguishing first the micronutrients from macronutrients, right? So
Sure.
macronutrients are what yield energy. That's the strict definition of a macronutrient. So our fats, proteins, carbohydrates, water often gets neglected, but is technically the fourth macronutrient. Maybe the fifth one would be sunlight, right?
Hmm.
If we want to get really fun with it.
Yeah.
But the main three we typically talk about are protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Right? So those are what yield energy, what yield ATP.
Right.
Then we have the nutrients from our diet, which act as cofactors. That's the kind of vital process that these vitamins and minerals and amino acids are serving in our body, they're acting as cofactors to facilitate all of these metabolic processes, right?
Yeah.
So I like to think of it from the perspective of the mitochondria, because so many of us are fatigued,
Yeah.
and all of us are looking for more energy, right? I don't
True.
think anyone would say, no, I'm not looking to get any more energy, right? So we have these energy powerhouses, the energy factories in our cells called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria produce energy in the form of ATP.
Yeah.
But we don't get that ATP for free. So just like a car engine needs gasoline, the mitochondria need fuel.
Right.
And the fuel for those mitochondria that's where nutrition comes in. Right? So when I'm thinking about mitochondrial support, I'm thinking about B vitamins as being a very major category. I'm thinking about CoQ10. I'm thinking about trace minerals, especially magnesium. Yeah. Magnesium plays a major role in mitochondrial function.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and I created Fusionary Formulas because I believe everyone deserves a natural way to support their body's health. If you struggle with joint discomfort or stiffness, our turmeric gold delivers powerful curcumin in a form your body can truly absorb. It's science-backed with the highest quality ingredients and designed to support your body's natural inflammatory response. Take the next step in your health and wellness journey today. Visit fusionaryformulas.com and use code FusionaryHealth for 15% off. Fusionary Formulas, ancient wisdom, modern science, maximum impact.
Copper doesn't really often very much get appreciated in the role of mitochondrial function, but there's a great book from a gentleman named Morley Robbins called Cure Your Fatigue. And I say that the book is like one long manifesto on the importance of copper for mitochondrial health, which is really interesting. Right? So if we're lacking those nutrients, we don't have enough fuel for the mitochondria to do their job. So sometimes I'll say this, like if we were to put sand in your gas tank, like, should we be surprised that the car's not running?
Nope, right? We shouldn't.
Right. So you can't fuel your body on processed foods and junk food and expect the engine to run.
Right.
Right. And so we have this epidemic of everything from fatigue to autoimmune diseases increasing over time, heart disease, cancer, all these big killers in the United States. Well, I think that's one of the most foundational and fundamental places to start is with good nutrition.
Sure.
When we're talking about the thyroid, I love talking about this because it's really getting down to basics. We have this thyroid hormone we talked about. We said that T3 is like the gas pedal for the car engine, right? For all of the cells in our body. So what is T3? How does our body make it? This is where nutrition meets function. Yeah. So the letter T stands for tyrosine. Right? Tyrosine is an amino acid. It comes from another amino acid called phenylalanine, right? But all right, right off the bat, what does that tell us? We need to be getting protein in the diet.
Right.
And that protein gets broken down into these amino acids like phenylalanine and tyrosine is a fundamental building block for thyroid hormone. Someone could have low thyroid hormone levels because they're protein deficient. Then we look at...
You just blew my mind right there. I'm like, oh shit. I was like, I'm vegetarian. No wonder I have so many problems. Okay, continue on.
We could do a whole other podcast on that. I'm a former vegan during that period when I was hypothyroid for many years. For nearly a decade, I was vegetarian and then vegan for another few years too. Wow. So I'm sympathetic to that approach. I understand it very well.
Yeah.
It happened that it did not work for me.
Yeah.
In terms of, because I can say when I started incorporating animal protein again, it was a tough decision, but it was like turning the lights back on in my brain.
Wow.
So there's that.
Okay.
Right? Then, all right, the number, where does this random number come from? T4, T3. And so the number is actually represents the number of iodine molecules that are needed to form that hormone.
Okay.
So T4, let's break this down, very simple, is literally tyrosine plus 4 iodine. Boop, that's T4, right?
Okay.
T3 is tyrosine plus 3 iodine molecules.
Okay.
There's actually an enzyme called deiodinase, and its job is just to remove 1 iodine from T4. That's what converts it to T3.
Got it. And we're all iodine deficient and eating Himalayan salt and Celtic salt, and no longer want iodized bleached salt.
That's right. You had mentioned Sardinia, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the blue zones.
Yeah.
Another famous blue zone is Okinawa in Japan. One of the highest rates of centenarians, people living to be 100 or beyond.
Yeah.
And so their diet is very rich in seafood, in fish, sea vegetables, possibly shellfish. I'm not sure if they're big on shellfish.
Yeah.
I think I've heard estimates that the Okinawan diet is about 30 times higher in iodine than in like traditional westernized cultures like the United States.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is a foundational, fundamental, you could say, non-negotiable nutrient for producing thyroid hormones, iodine. So the average client that I work with, I'll look at their food journal. I'm not seeing very much seafood in there at all. It's not a judgment. It's just not very common within the standard American diet.
Sure.
So,
and if you buy an iodine supplement, I bought one when I embarked on fixing my thyroid last year. It tastes gross. I tried putting it in my water and I was like, I do not want to consume this. And I'm generally pretty good at, you give me something gross or hard to do and I will figure it out and just do it. Like I have all sorts of powders and mixes I'm using right now for health. I'll do it. But that one was especially unpalatable. So how do you get people their iodine if they're not going to get it through diet?
They can consider increasing the amount of fish or shellfish they're consuming in the diet.
Sure.
You can eat kelp or other sea vegetables, kelp, dulse, these sorts of things. You can take kelp capsules, right? So you can take kelp in a supplement form.
Okay.
1 capsule of kelp, I believe, has about 300 micrograms of iodine per capsule.
Okay.
So, let's say you were to take 3 to 4 of those a day. You're getting about 1 milligram of iodine, which I feel like is generally safe for most people.
Okay.
But I do test for iodine levels when working with clients to be on the safe side.
Sure.
This is a little bit getting into the weeds. This is something that Dr. David Brownstein, he talks about in his book. It's fantastic. It's called Iodine, Why You Need It.
Okay.
Very simple title, Iodine, Why You Need It.
I'm going to write a book called Turmeric, Why You Need It after this for all of you. Because I really do think there should be a turmeric manifesto.
You should.
How important it is for everything.
I'll be the first to pre-order. Awesome. Yeah. So I love that idea. So in his book, he talks about these cofactors, meaning there are nutrients your body needs sort of first to kind of prep the body for iodine. This is where I think some of the controversy around, or some of the hate, which I think is mostly unwarranted around iodine, comes in.
Sure.
I think people start taking it. They might have an adverse reaction, but they didn't prep their body with the cofactors first.
I see.
So these cofactors include magnesium, selenium, vitamin B2, B3, and sodium.
Interesting.
Yeah, sodium, like from salt.
Yeah.
Your body needs your body needs adequate sodium to actually open up these. They're called symporters. It's like the transport vehicle that your thyroid uses to get the iodine in the thyroid gland.
New question. You're talking about cofactors, and I'm learning a lot about cofactors right now. And when I sat in class the other night, I learned that these cofactors are part of the building blocks of everything. Neurotransmitters. I'm a pretty brain obsessed and pretty gut obsessed. And I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me if I don't get all the vitamins and minerals you just named, plus I don't get all the amino acids, I simply won't have the building blocks or cofactors for my neurotransmitters to work?
Yeah, correct.
Oh my God. Yeah. But then what if the majority of America has leaky gut and they're just sitting there eating steak all day and eating really hard to digest meat like it's their full-time job, are they absorbing all the amino acids and getting all the benefits? Or are we wasting our opportunity and we need to fix the gut first to get those amino
Yeah.
acids?
No, it's a really great point. So we hear this expression. I'm sure everyone listening has heard this expression, you are what you eat,
Right.
which is only partially true, in my opinion. It's actually more that you are what you absorb.
Right.
So you could be eating the most nutrient dense, pasture raised, organic, farm raised, farmers market food,
Yeah.
right? But if your gut is a mess, you're not absorbing properly. It's
Yeah.
not a reason not to eat healthy, by the way, but
True.
we might be absorbing less of that nutrition if we're not absorbing it, if we're dealing with intestinal permeability.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's absolutely a really good point. And yeah, it almost seems unfair, right? It's like, gosh, it's like such an uphill battle. I have to do all of these things. And if I'm missing any one of these nutrients, my body maybe won't make the neurotransmitters or won't make the thyroid hormone.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's, what's the alternative, right? If we don't invest some time and energy into learning some of these things,
Right.
then the alternative is a lifetime of suboptimal health, right? So
Correct.
that's kind of the trade-off.
Correct. Or it's an undercurrent storm building and you're
Yeah,
just seeing some canary in the coal mine messages. You're seeing it with your thyroid and different things. Numbers are moving in the wrong direction, but you're not putting the constellation of symptoms together. And so recently I told my HRT team, I was like, thank you. We're done. You guys did a phenomenal job. You've made me look and feel awesome. Thank you. Like I
I
really
love that.
wanted that brain support, that energy, and my metabolism on track, and I won. So thank you, but I have to go embark on this new journey called functional medicine has to fix my gut with me. And if we don't address those big functional medicine issues, I find what we're doing with HRT is we're like, it's almost like you're buying, I don't know a good analogy, but you are buying like the result you want, but you're forgetting that underneath there's a whole level that had to be dealt with, and there's a price to pay for not managing that level of support. And recently it was kind of embarrassing. I hired a coach and I was like, listen, I'm telling you, I eat well. Everything coming into my house is organic, fresh. I source local where I can. Like food is made fresh in my home. I eat a Hindu organic vegetarian diet that's nutrient dense. I'm not lying. I'm telling you, I'm not weird and sitting here surviving on like Ritz crackers and cheese. Like I'm eating well. She was funny. It's not about what you're eating. I trust that you're eating well. I see what you post in your Instagram stories all day about everything you're eating well. It's that your gut stopped absorbing.
Sure.
Your mold that you didn't even know could take such a toll, erase 90% of your gut microbiome. And we're lucky that you are such a good practitioner. You hold self-care and health at such a high level. You're not symptomatic, so you just didn't know. But now that you know and you understand health, you know you have to stop, pause, and really address this. And
Mhm.
so, looking at that, as practitioners, we know the work it takes. When I
Yeah.
tell my friends this, everyone around me is like, why did you test? Why did you go looking for new problems? Why do you have to make such a big deal about everything? And
Hmm.
why are you taking 25 supplements at a time? And I just look at them and I'm like, guys, if I think what you're saying is if it can happen to Shivani, who loves her health so much, it could very much be happening to me. And I'm scared and I don't want to pay for that. I
Uh,
don't want to do that work. That's kind of the reflection I'm feeling. And so for our audience today, will
hmm.
you kind of share, in your opinion, what is that end result of not taking these moments when our body is starting to share symptoms? For me, it was brain fog. My brain was not like I didn't have the retention I wanted. And I thought, hey, Shivani, you're very smart. You aren't remembering things, something is up. And my vision changed. And I was like, that's weird things happening all at once. Let's go check on this. No other real symptom. And then that led me down the rabbit hole. But what do you see as, and you probably have I mean, I already know you have a huge client base of people who've come to you for these kinds of issues. What have you seen as those later catastrophic type things that happen with people? And then how have you helped them reverse out of it?
When you say catastrophic issues, do you mean some of the things that might be revealed by lab testing that's
Yes.
kind of inhibiting their growth?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that most people listening may not realize. Most people listening might be like, you know
sure.
what? Your guys are going real deep, and that doesn't apply to me. And I
Mm,
tell every woman, I think 90% of us have subclinical thyroid issues starting in our 30s, and we're just
yeah,
not catching it. And the
sure.
doctors we're going to will not diagnose that, nor will they give us a toolkit to support it. And so, if
Mm.
subclinical thyroid, subclinical because Western medicine won't see it or acknowledge it or say that that lab test shows it, how are you able to kind of guide people and say, look, actually, let's talk about this? There are resources and options for you.
So a big part of the work I do is helping to pick up the pieces where they left off with their doctor, right? Where these are just things that Western medicine is not looking for, like some of the missing pieces to the equation, right? So my job when I'm working with someone is to do a thorough, comprehensive investigation, like I said earlier, and sort of leave no stone unturned. And when I'm working with someone with a thyroid issue or autoimmunity, really any chronic condition, they're going to get that same comprehensive kind of Monahan style investigation when we work together. And so we're going to be looking at the gut, the liver, nutrient levels, heavy metals, mineral status, all of these things together to form a plan and identify what is holding you back, what is interfering with your ability to experience optimal health.
Right.
It's my belief that our bodies are designed to function optimally. The opposite of function is dysfunction. The opposite of ease is dis-ease. So, how can we use the lab work to move that person from a state of dysfunction to normal function?
Right.
So, over the years, I've tended to see some themes, right? Getting to your question about some of these common, hidden stressors in the body
Yeah.
that I sort of put into 5 different buckets of stressors, right? Or 5 different factors. So we have the pathogen bucket, or like bugs. That would include everything from mold and fungal overgrowth to H. pylori,
Yeah.
dysbiosis, parasites, SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those bugs or pathogens, by the way, those can be major drivers of that leaky gut issue. So until we address what's going on in the gut, Hippocrates said 500 BC, all disease begins in the gut, and he was right. That was 2,500 years ago that he said that,
Yeah.
allegedly.
And that's what Ayurveda says.
That's
Ayurveda
right.
said all disease, all life problems, everything mood, it all starts in the gut.
And yeah, not to get into like even like the microbiome and its impact. There are more individual bacterial cells in one person, like just in you or I, than there are known stars in the universe,
Right.
which
Isn't
is
that
really
crazy?
wild to think about. And it's like an organ. If you add up the weight of all the bacteria, it weighs about as much as the brain, or at least the weight of your heart, somewhere in between that weight. So it is kind of like its own organ system. So we have that bug or pathogen bucket. We have the toxin bucket, right? So that's your environmental toxins like pesticides or BPA, phthalates. That includes heavy metals. That includes mold toxins. So the pathogen bucket, the toxin bucket. There's the nutrient deficiency bucket, which is very widespread and prevalent. It's most people, especially if you're dealing with leaky gut because you're not absorbing everything, right?
Right.
So we have to plug those holes so your body, your cells, your mitochondria, your tissues have the nutrients they need to do their job,
Right.
right? To restore function. You're you don't get normal function without nutrients, right? That's what nutrients are all about, function. Then we have the food sensitivity bucket. Things that are
Mm,
really common in the autoimmune world would be like gluten and dairy are some of the most common culprits. But there can
yeah.
be other surprising ones that come up on a food sensitivity panel you
Yeah.
wouldn't think of.
Totally.
Carrots, mango,
Onion,
peanuts, onion, just random things.
egg
Right?
yolk on mine
Egg
recently.
yolk. Okay, so that came up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which is, I think, maybe the elephant in the room for a lot of people that they don't want to maybe address as much head on because it's easier to take the supplements, it's easier to change the diet even, but it's the stress bucket, right? It's
Yeah.
that chronic stress, that chronic fight or flight,
Yeah.
mental and emotional stress bucket, which if you're not taking care of and you don't have some system in place for whether it's meditation, yoga, breath work, any kind of vagal tone exercises, you're just not going to heal.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Your body doesn't do any healing when it's in fight or flight. It does most of the healing and repair in a parasympathetic state, the rest and digest state of our nervous system. So, healing, it sounds easy when I say it out loud or on
Yeah.
paper, but it really is as simple of a matter as lowering, like reducing the stress out of each of those 5 buckets: the bugs, toxins, nutrient deficiencies, food sensitivities, and stress.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Those are going to drive your inflammation. They're going to drive all the systems to be slowed down. It's going to affect everything. And I think we underestimate the importance of that in relation to thyroid health, hormone
Yeah,
health, honestly, every system working well.
that's right. It all has to be working together in harmony in order to produce an optimal result. So the thyroid doesn't just function in isolation from the rest of these body systems whatsoever. I actually said before we started recording, your thyroid dysfunction has virtually nothing to do with the thyroid,
Right.
right? So when you're dealing with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, or even the opposite end of the equation, like Graves or hyperthyroidism, which doesn't tend to get enough attention, but I do work with some clients with Graves and hyperthyroidism. Both sides of the same coin,
Right.
but I look at that as just a check engine light, warning light from your body that there are deeper issues lurking underneath the surface, likely a combination of what's going on with those 5 buckets.
Got it.
So,
Are there any other symptoms or check engine lights people should keep in mind when it comes to thyroid condition? You mentioned brain fog, constipation, weight gain, feeling cold,
yeah, hair loss,
hair loss.
depression, or anxiety, but depression maybe is a little more common with the body's metabolism slowing down.
Okay.
Thinning eyebrows, like the outer third of the eyebrows, that could
Sure.
be a kind of a physical symptom that you might be able to tell. Sometimes you will see like edema, like facial swelling with
Okay.
hypothyroidism. So SIBO is actually, there's a lot of crossover with SIBO and hypothyroidism.
Really?
What happens is that if the thyroid slows down, your gut motility slows down, that
Okay.
peristalsis, like in between meals.
Yeah.
So then you're not moving food and bacteria and debris down the GI tract at a normal rate. So it's like the intestinal tract just kind of seizes up, right?
Sure.
And then you just have food sitting there
Right.
in the gut, not moving. Well,
Right.
that food, it just becomes like a buffet, like a feeding frenzy for the bacteria in the small intestine, right?
Right.
So then those bacteria start to overpopulate,
Got it.
and that
Bacterial
causes
overgrowth.
excess fermentation
Right.
of that food that's just kind of sitting there inert. And then you get a buildup of like hydrogen or methane gas that's causing the bloating
Yeah.
issues and the acid reflux and the constipation or diarrhea.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, SIBO issues.
Yeah.
If someone's dealing with SIBO, I might be suspecting that actually slow thyroid function is going to
Interesting.
very much be worth investigating.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I just had Siobhan Sarna on the podcast and we chatted. It's like one of the recent episodes on SIBO. And she said, if you've had food poisoning in your life, you have a very significant
Yes.
likeliness of having SIBO. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, I had food poisoning just in the last few years. That's crazy. And then my next question to her was, don't GLP-1s slow down gut motility? So aren't we slowing down
That's
our own guts in the name of a revved up metabolism, in the name of looking good? And thus aren't we causing all sorts of trouble? She goes, well, yeah, slowing down gut is
right.
never good. And I was like, oh God.
I think a lot of conventional medicine is sort of like, we're hitting ourselves on the head with a hammer and then we're taking Advil for the pain. Right.
Right.
And as soon as we stop taking the Advil, the pain comes right back because we never stopped hitting ourselves on the head with a hammer.
Right.
And, that's not to say that conventional medicine does not have a time or place,
Sure. Of
right?
course.
Because there are scenarios where, if I break my arm, please take me to the ER, not the herbalist, right?
Right. Of course.
So I think, we excel at urgent care, acute emergency care here in the US.
We do.
But I think what's lacking is an understanding of like the chronic health conditions
Right.
and the diet and lifestyle support. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we need way more support in those arenas and honestly, more acknowledgement of diet and lifestyle being a key piece in the development and prevention of these same issues. Like, if you don't have time to explain to people that diet and lifestyle can reverse it, they're not going to take it that seriously. And
Right.
so, hopefully, since pandemic, people have realized, health sovereignty is in my hands. I need
Mm,
to take it on. I need to figure this out. I need to test
right.
what works. I need to go to the right kind of practitioner for me, who can really hold my hand and guide me through this journey. And I've always said on this podcast, it's not easy to make big health changes. You have to find the right practitioner who you can put your faith in, who you can trust, who can educate you, who can hold space for you. And oftentimes I'm asking a practitioner to hold they're holding the potentiality of what I'm seeking as well, because
Mm,
they know this, they've done this. And so I think it is so important that we take these pauses to find that right practitioner to test everything, because our body check engine light sometimes is going off and we're choosing to ignore it. And if you ignore it for too long, I've learned this with my own car. You ignore it for too long, and that
yeah.
price, I almost once had to replace an engine on a car because it was lighting up this message, and I was like,
You
I'll
know,
take it in.
people complain about the cost of functional medicine,
Yeah.
and I get it, but the cost of not investing in your health can be far greater.
True.
One visit to the ER for a an acute health scenario or condition
Yeah.
can cost tens of thousands of dollars.
True.
So that cost of prevention is actually a lot lower. The tricky thing is just a lot of people don't tend to want to act on their health until something out of the ordinary or urgent starts to happen. But
Right.
my perspective, I say this all the time, I would rather someone be investing in their health before all those issues come about, do the what I call the pre-flight checklist,
Yeah.
rather than waiting for while the plane is midair crashing towards the ground, and then you're frantically trying to diagnose why the plane is crashing.
Right.
It's just that's not an ideal way to approach things. And
Absolutely.
you know, to be honest, like when I was younger and I was diagnosed with that Hashimoto's condition, my diet and lifestyle were not great. I ate poorly. I had a lot of stress that I wasn't dealing with properly. I lived in that home with the mold that we talked about, right? And so I didn't take any of that seriously, and I paid a dire price for that. I paid a massive price for that.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, I lost on one of the best decades of my life.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll be completely honest with you and your listeners for the podcast that there were many years of having to overcome a lot of anger
Yeah.
around, you even said it when you were in college, like, why me? Why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, these should be the best years of my life. And there was so much, like, grieving was the word I was searching for. It was like a
Yeah.
intense grieving process. But what I did was I harnessed that energy. I took that anger and frustration and I transmuted it. And I said, you know what? Like, I'm going to take my health into my own hands. I'm going to become my own self healer.
Nice.
I'm not going to listen to these doctors saying there's nothing I could do about the thyroid issue. I got my thyroid antibodies from being around 12 to 1500 down to essentially zero, like the remission range.
Wow.
Okay. And it's possible. I do this all the time with my clients. There's
Nice.
2 clients I'm working with right now. One is an 18-year-old guy in high school. It's been such a pleasure to work with. His antibodies started at 2,000.
Whoa.
They're now down to 200.
Wow.
Okay? So that's something like an 80, 90% reduction. Another guy I'm working with, We just retested his thyroid antibodies. Similar story. We've gotten them down 88%, the
Wow.
TPO antibody. He couldn't believe, he said, I didn't know it could be done that fast in 3 or 4 months. And I told him, you know what? It took me 10 years to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was learning all this stuff. I didn't have a mentor or a teacher or like a really knowledgeable functional health practitioner. At the
Right.
time, it was actually still kind of emerging and new.
Yeah. Yes.
So, what I like to tell people is my journey is your shortcut when I work with someone. It's like you could take 2, 3, 5, 10 years to try to figure it out on your own,
True.
or let's fast track it, right?
Yeah.
Let's
It's
run the
true.
labs. I'll tell you what's going to work, what's not going to work. But yeah, just it takes that mindset of being willing to invest in your health and thinking about how that's going to translate and benefit you in the long term in terms of your health, your wealth, your happiness, your well-being, the presence with your family. Maybe you're wanting to travel more, you're wanting to start a new business or whatever it might be. And you're not doing those things because your health is holding you back. So, how much is that costing you by
True.
not, everything is a choice. Like there's the cost of action, there's the cost of not acting.
True.
So that's my little pep talk for everyone.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so important to give those pep talks because sometimes people can feel stuck. They can feel
Mm.
frustrated. They can feel like, I don't have space in my life right now to deal with this, so I'm not going to go find any answers. Sometimes people don't want to know. And so it is true that inaction also has a price.
A
And
cost. Yeah.
and I was sharing that example. I did take my car in once and the guy said, you were 2 seconds from buying a new $25,000 engine for this car. Like you waited
Yeah.
way too long. This was way too bad. You are lucky we were able to clean this thing up. And next time, please don't ever do that again. And I learned. So with
Right.
my car now, when
Mhm.
I see a problem, I go running to the car guy. I'm like, hey, lights on, problem. Something is off. Something sounds off. He's like, okay, we will dig into it. And why can't we be that
Mm.
respectful of our health as we are to our cars?
And your car needs maintenance, let's say maybe every 3 months.
Yeah.
Oil changes, brake pads,
Yeah.
oil filter. But your body needs that maintenance every day. That's
Yeah.
that's the big difference. Right? And
True.
every choice we make, it's sort of like we're either putting a little investment in the bank of our long-term health, or when we make a decision that's maybe counterproductive to our health and well-being, we're actually making a debit from that account.
Right. Yeah. It's very true.
So that's one way to think about it, is these little decisions, they add up over time. That also helps me make it feel less overwhelming. It's like shrinking the change.
Sure.
Behavioral psychology tells us, like, little by little, a little becomes a lot.
True.
So rather than saying, I'm going to put my Hashimoto's into remission within the next 6 months, which actually may be possible, by the way.
Yeah.
But, let's start small first. Like, let's start with, all right, maybe removing gluten from your diet,
Right.
maybe filtering your water,
Yeah.
right? Maybe, making a commitment to get at least 30 minutes of exercise 3 or 4 days a week, and you find that you do these things and it's a perpetual motion machine, right? It's a virtuous cycle. You start
Absolutely.
wanting to do more. It's like, oh, that actually worked. I do feel 20, 30% better. What else could I do to keep climbing that ladder and feeling my best?
Absolutely. So is there anything else that we didn't talk about when it comes to thyroid health? Because I feel like we approached it from many directions, but was there any final thoughts around thyroid that you wanted to share before we wrap up today?
There was one thing I forgot to mention, which I think is super important. So there's a scenario which a lot of people run into where they run the TSH, T4, T3. They actually do run a full thyroid panel, and it actually does all look normal.
Yeah.
But they still feel those telltale signs, like we talked about: the fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, depression, constipation, low libido. That's another one we didn't talk about.
Sure.
With hypothyroidism. So what's going on there, right? Because the doctor is almost certainly in that scenario likely to say your thyroid is fine.
Yeah.
This is all in your head. You're just stressed, right?
Yep.
Which is like the ultimate gaslighting. You're just stressed, right? So you mentioned earlier Dr. Balkavich.
Yes.
I actually learned about this. I'm going to give him the credit where it's due. His book, The Thyroid Debacle, right? He talks about the cell danger response, right? So I'm going to try to break this down really simply. So we talked about how your thyroid, it produces the thyroid hormone. That's the thyroid hormone factory, right? But that's only one side of the equation. Like when I call you, Shivani, like on my iPhone, you have to answer that call with your phone on the other side of it, right? And we both have to have good cell phone signal for that
Correct.
call to come through clearly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that thyroid hormone is produced, it travels through the bloodstream, ultimately to reach all the target cells throughout the body. But if we're in a state of stress physiology, which is referred to as the cell danger response, our cells shift from a normal healthy state of taking in the hormones and nutrients and giving them to the mitochondria, making energy, to this totally different state where they kind of shut down, right? They go into this protective state. They can actually like literally stiffen up, right? So, all right, what can happen is if you're in this cell danger response, is that the thyroid hormone, there's plenty of it. There's normal levels of it in your blood, but it's not getting in to the cells.
Interesting.
So you still feel all of those same symptoms, even when your thyroid panel looks normal. All right. So what do I do if that might be actually happening, right? Well, first and foremost, we need to regulate the nervous system, get out of that cell danger response, right? So the stress reduction piece is going to be really key.
Right.
But also it means we need to do a broader investigation. We need to see what's going on in the gut, the toxic burden, and so on and so forth. Right. Because these bugs and toxins can also trigger that protective cell danger response. They're trying to protect themselves from these foreign antigens, these bad bugs or toxins. And so the cells go in this protective shutdown mode. They stop taking in the thyroid hormone. So my overarching point there is that even just running a thyroid panel, if you're really trying to get to the bottom of this, it's oftentimes not enough.
We all need a stool test. Let's just be honest. If we don't do a stool test annually, we have no idea what the heck is going on. And our blood work is so inaccurate. I do blood work on myself all the time. Until I look at a stool test, you don't get real answers on what's the underlying current.
It's a starting place. It is foundational. Like I run blood chemistry on every person that I work with.
Sure.
And so you can get lots of good little like breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
But with many markers, like some thyroid markers, for example, I'm going to have like more questions than answers. Like a good example is your liver enzymes, like ALT, AST.
Yeah.
Well, when those liver enzymes are elevated, that can be from a toxic burden. Yeah. That could be from excessive alcohol consumption. It could be from viral infections like Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus. Your liver enzymes could be elevated if you're insulin resistant, right? Where you have fatty liver issues going on. So even just one blood marker being out of range, I'm just going to have a lot more questions. And I need to keep looking deeper like a detective to investigate, well, the reason your liver enzymes are elevated may be very different for why mine are elevated.
Correct.
So this stuff is not so cut and dry.
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all, templated approach.
No.
And so every person I work with is like, I act as though it's the first time in a sense I've ever done this, because I don't want to rest on my laurels and say, oh yeah, they just get this kind of templated approach.
Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think it's so beautiful to watch the integrative and functional medicine space become such incredible detectives for our health, because unfortunately in modern day times, there's a complexity layer, and those complexity layers are kind of there, and we need investigators to help like unpack even the volume of testing I just did. I was like, we need a multi-hour session. It's taking a few different practitioners to come down to what is the game plan, because sometimes the project is big. And sometimes you need not just the practitioner, but the health coach alongside, who's going to help you build the consistent plan in place to execute what we're talking about. And sometimes you can also get so down in the weeds with it, which is good and bad. But DNA testing and really getting into, okay, well,
Nutrients.
yeah, how do we really optimize for this person? And that's a custom plan. You can't just go to someone who has 7 minutes for you and they're going to be able to help you with that. It's a whole different approach to health and medicine.
Right.
So thank you for coming on today, Ryan. It's been
Thank you so much.
incredible to talk to you again.
Greatly appreciate it.
I love talking to you. You have a beautiful way of taking pretty big concepts and breaking them down into beautiful metaphors and a simple way to kind of see and understand, absorb, and I can retain what you explain now because I'm like, okay, finally, I got it. I got how T3 and T4 work. If you use car analogies, then I've really got it. So thank you. This was
Yeah.
perfect today.
The funny thing is I'm not even a car person. Like
You're not?
I don't know anything about how cars work. Yeah.
Okay.
I can fix the human body, but I can't fix a car.
Got it. Well, we all have our skill sets. I'm really into driving cars. I'm certainly not into fixing them.
Yeah.
But I always love my car performing at top notch, so I can race around like a race car driver. So
That's
thank
awesome.
you for joining me on the podcast
Anytime.
today.
Yeah. Delighted to be here.
I love how you educate. And will you share where everyone can find you?
Yeah. So again, my name is Ryan Monahan. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. I go by the Mindful Nutrivore. Nutrivore is Nutrivore. And you could find me at themindfulnutrivore.com. You could email me, Ryan at themindfulnutrivore. You can DM me if you'd like on Instagram at themindfulnutrivore. I try to just keep that consistent across the board. And I am taking on clients one-on-one to do this kind of deep work if anyone was interested. I work remotely with clients from all across the country, even the world. I have a client right now in Hong Kong.
Nice.
I'm going to be taking on a client in Mexico here pretty soon.
Cool.
And I have the ability to just ship those lab kits right to your home. So
Nice.
we can do everything from Zoom, which is pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today. And for everyone listening, thanks for listening to the Fusionary Health Podcast. Please share this episode with someone in your life who needs to hear this message. We are here to share this message to reach everyone who needs it. And so by sharing it, by liking, subscribing, leaving a testimonial, that's how we get these messages of integrative medicine out into the world. Please follow me at shivanigupta.com and to get more information on this podcast. And we will see you next week for the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.